tenure. Good morning. So as Rabbi Cooper said, June is LGBTQ Pride Month. And this weekend, many cities across the US and around the globe are marking Pride Weekend. That said, I imagine that some of you might have a simple but important question. Why do we need pride? Well, let's start by looking at what it means to be proud, to be confident and admire ourselves, to find satisfaction in who we are and what we have accomplished, to stand up against our adversaries, and for LGBTQ folks to celebrate our truths. Pride has become a celebration, but at its heart, it's still a powerful form of political protest that began in 1970, 1 year after the Stonewall riots, which many consider the beginning of the modern gay rights movement. Pride is not a parade, but a march. Yes, it's a celebration, but Pride also allows queer folks and our allies to make a powerful statement. It's an opportunity for us to climb up onto soapboxes and parade floats to say, we're here, we're queer, and we're proud of who we are. For many years prior to the pandemic, I marched with a strong and beautiful contingent of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer Jews along with our allies. From Orthodox to just Jewish, we marched, as thousands will do tomorrow, to make a basic statement. We are people who deserve equal rights. In this week's Parsha, Shlach Lecha, we read of the 12 spies Moses sends into the Promised Land, the land the Israelites are poised to enter and inherit. They come back with reports for Moses, and 10 out of the dozen describe a land full of powerful giants. We looked like grasshoppers next to them, and they will crush us, they say. Yet the Torah tells us that what these men really brought was an evil report of the land. Vayetziu dibat haaretz. Ibn Ezra tells us this means simply that they spread lies. Why? They were afraid of something unfamiliar, of a great unknown. Like these 10 spies, many queer people feel small and powerless. As rabbi and LGBTQ activist Camille Shira Angel writes, we internalize this deprecation. I find disturbing parallels between the reports spread by these 10 scouts and the lies that some politicians and homophobes spread about the LGBTQ community. Lies they promulgate because they're afraid of something unknown and unfamiliar to them. There are more than 340 pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation pending across this country right now. The Supreme Court's rulings this past week may lead to further reversals of legislation. Why do we need pride? For the same reasons we appreciate the 2 spies who didn't lie. Joshua ben Nun and Caleb ben Yefuneh see something different. They see the good, and they take pride in it. Haaretz asher avarnu ba latur ota tova haaretz me'od me'od. The land which we traversed and scouted is an exceedingly good land. The other spies have lied and given their terrible report, but Joshua and Caleb see the positive. They see a future in this land they have investigated, so much so that they call it exceedingly good, tova me'od me'od. The Or HaChaim, an 18th century mystical scholar, teaches that the two wanted so much to contradict the other spies' negative report. So Joshua and Caleb repeated the word me'od a lot to say that the land gave good fruit and was good to live in. They argued that the flaws described by the other spies were issues that would not matter with help from God. The lesson Joshua and Caleb brought was that God had given them a gift. Why do we need pride? Because trans people are more than 4 times as likely as cisgender, people who live the gender that they're assigned at birth, heterosexual people to experience violent victimization, according to a recent study at UCLA. Because every 45 seconds, a young queer person attempts suicide. Because, and I don't have the details on this, but apparently last night in Oslo, there was a shooting at a gay bar, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but there was anti-queer violence on the night leading up to Pride. And here in the United States, some of our leaders are simply not helping. We live in a country where leaders in a different state recently passed a document defining homosexuality as an abnormal lifestyle, and they rejected trans identities. Why do we need pride? Caleb and Joshua had it when others didn't. They saw goodness and possibility where other men saw only defeat. They took pride in the land that would become the future of the Israelites, Eretz Asher hi zavat chalav udvash, the land that flows with milk and honey. Even without farmers working it, the Italian commentator Sforno teaches, the land flows with honey and is bountiful. Through Caleb, Rabbi Angel teaches, God is countering the negative self-image and engendering pride in its place. So too, in the aftermath of 1969 Stonewall riots, members of the Gay Liberation Front, described as the most dysfunctional organization that has ever existed in the LGBTQ community, they became some of the earliest activists for Pride. They were a bountiful group of talented, dedicated people. Sure, they bickered. Yes, they complained, but they stood up. They organized 3 Pride marches a year after Stonewall, as well as the first LGBT community center and the first organization for gay youth. They laid the foundation for a movement which made it all the way to the Supreme Court with rulings such as Obergefell versus Hodges, which made same-sex marriage legal in the United States. They made it to the CJLS, the Conservative Judaism Committee on Jewish Laws and Standards, which in 2006 published a teshuvah, a ruling on Jewish law, welcoming lesbian, gay, and bisexual Jews into conservative synagogues and seminaries, paving the way for, among other things, me to be speaking here to you today. Rights for trans Jews have since been affirmed as well. This month, President Biden showed his allyship when he signed an executive order banning federal funding of debunked conversion therapy and expanding protection of transgender youth. We need pride, not only to ensure that these laws remain on the books, but to ensure that more legislation like this is enacted and that rights are not taken away from anyone. Why did the members of the Gay Liberation Front need pride? They were sick and tired of having to live their lives in the closet, of being forced to go to underground bars. They were furious to not have their relationships recognized by the law. But they also had pride because they saw the power of the love they had for each other. They realized that the new families that future LGBTQ folks would create, those would be beautiful families. Families with children like the 2 gay dads whose straight son was bar mitzvah a few weeks ago at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, the LGBTQ synagogue in New York. Folks like my friend Hannah, who was assigned male at birth. She is now an important trans activist, and she just got back from leading a birthright trip to Israel for young LGBTQ adults. Folks like me. Why do I need pride? You might remember when I stood here and spoke to you for the first time last August. I told you that I grew up not knowing how to be gay and Jewish. Because of my sexual orientation, I was ostracized by the synagogue where I grew up, and by extension, alienated from Judaism more broadly. Blessedly, organizations in the gay community and then in the queer progressive Jewish community became my lifelines. Today, I stand up with pride because I know, to borrow another slogan, it gets better. And I knew and I know that it wouldn't get better just for me, which it has, but for so many LGBTQ people around the country, around the world. It gets better. One of the first Pride marches I attended was a 1993 march in Washington, D.C. Around 1 million people came together to stand up for the LGBTQ community. It was the first time I was in a place where it seemed like everyone was gay. It was incredibly empowering, not just for me. The closest Jewish analogy I can come up with this is, you know that feeling that you get when you go down that ramp at Ben Gurion and you are in Israel and you are home? It felt like that. I felt like I was entering a promised land that was full of milk and honey. I remember reading a news article a day or two after that march. It told of a young man who was in the car with his parents. They had just driven from their conservative hometown to DC for a family trip. But when the parents realized what was going on in the city, they suggested turning around and heading back home. The teenage son, though, was empowered to come out to his parents from the back seat. Pride gave him a safe space. So too, pride gives me the blessing of support from my friends and my parents, the blessings they gave when I came out to them. And I've been fully welcomed and supported by Jewish communities where I am now blessed to learn, to worship, and to teach. Why does Temple Beth Hillel Bethel need pride? The clergy and the leaders of this congregation want to ensure that we welcome everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, color, ability, everyone. It's a blessing to be spending Shabbat in a synagogue where queer youth have stood on the bima for their B'nai Mitzvah or their Gil HaMitzvot as their true self. Where we have, as Rabbi Cooper mentioned, where we've worked with Keshet, an organization that envisions a world in which all LGBTQ Jews and our families can live with full equality, justice, and dignity. In a program promoting inclusion for Jews, represented by all the colors on the pride flag, where I, as a gay rabbinical student, can learn and teach Torah and celebrate being in Jewish community with each and every one of you. Why do Jews need pride? Rabbi Akiva teaches that one of the most important principles of our faith, Klal Gadol BaTorah, is found in the book of Leviticus. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. This always reminds me of a story in the Talmud of a Gentile who comes to the great scholar Hillel and asks him to teach the entire Torah while standing on one foot. His answer, Da'alach sanei lachavarach lo ta'aved zohi kol haTorah kula ve'idach perusha hu zil gamur. That which is hateful to you, do not do to another. That is the entire Torah, and the rest is in its interpretation. Go and study. Love your fellow. Do not be hateful. We are all gay, lesbian, bi, straight, cisgender, trans, created B'Tselem Elohim, in the divine image. We have pride to remind us to treat everyone with love, with compassion, with dignity, and with kindness, not with hate. Why do we need pride? So we can all live in a world where we listen to the Joshuas and the Calebs, a world where we see the potential, the beauty, the love, a world where we focus neither on the giants nor the grasshoppers, but on the land that flows with milk and honey. May that land, our land, and all who dwell within it, celebrate pride in every color of the pride flag and in every color of the rainbow. Shabbat Shalom and happy Pride.